Hello. So to follow up on my previous video, and since a couple of people have requested it, I'm making this video to explain how to craft all of the pieces for morph/stacking Penance brand of Dissipation build. Feel free to skip around the video as you need with timestamps for whichever piece of gear you're interested in. There's just a couple of things I need to mention before we get started, so I don't repeat myself further down the line. Whenever I say suffixes cannot be changed, if your suffixes are full, you can use a wild bristle matron beast to add a meta modifier. So as you can see, there's 5 meta modifiers. 4 of them are suffixes and 1 of them is a prefix. So as long as your suffixes are full, it's a guaranteed suffix is going to be changed, which is usually significantly cheaper than the 2 divine bench mod. Just something to keep in mind whenever I mention that. Secondly, this league, Eldritch, Currency and Veiled Orbs were extremely expensive. So I ended up settling for a Veiled mod plus a bench mod usually, instead of going for Eldritch crafting T1 life, then a Veiled mod, and then a bench craft. So if you have the currency and the tolerance to go for the T1 life, for example, over here, you can go ahead and do that. Just note that I'm not going to be talking too much about that part of it over here. Cool, so let's get started from the top. First off, the helmet. So the reason we choose an armor base is because of this mastery over here. +1 to all maximum elemental resistances. If you've got your equipped helmet, and body armor and gloves and boots all have armor. If you don't care about that and would prefer damage, a Blizzard Crown is just straight up hands down better. Definitely go for that. There's a couple of things that might change. For example, if we're not in Necropolis and you're slamming for Conk Effect, your blockers might change. Just keep that in mind. And also, since we are in Necropolis and you're gravecrafting the Conk Effect Fractured, you would need to also have the Ritual Base's Corpse. But I'm going to assume you're using the armor base for now, so let's go ahead from there. The best way to start this off, because it saves a lot of money and time down the line, is an Elder base with Fractured Conk Effect. Obviously, if we're not in Necropolis, because Necropolis might not go core, or we don't know the state it'll be in when it goes core, this might not be a given. But for now, we're going to go ahead assuming we've got Conk Effect Fractured. How we get Conk Effect Fractured is if we go to Craft of Exile and choose a strength-based helmet and select Elder Influence, we can see, and we select Conk Effect over here, we can compute best selection and let it go ahead and give us what it thinks is the best way to get Conk Effect on your item. Now, by this point in the league, I was pretty tired of doing this, so I was basically going for quick and easy graveyard crafts and hoping to hit it with a lot less effort than going for the full graveyards, because less trading. So this is around about the number I ended up settling with, about 24 of these, and then also slapping in the corpses you need to fracture 2 modifiers, the corpses you need to split an item, and the corpses you need to obviously make it Shaper or Elder. Based off of that, so you get a 2 modifier item, so a prefix and a suffix, both of which will be fractured, and it will be split. So you end up with a clean Conk Effect on one if you hit it, and whatever else you get on the other. Side note, you could also even do this for profit, because a lot of the misses I got, like for example, I had fractured burning damage, sold for like 20 to 25 divines because it's an armor base, so it is pretty good. But once you hit your Conk Effect, do not forget to awaken the Shaper influence onto it. Yeah, don't go ahead and start crafting without that. Just remember that. So once you have your Shaper Elder base, unfortunately I can't put the Conk Effect Fractured on here because the Craft of Exile doesn't recognize the Fractured Influence mod yet. So I'll go ahead and just explain the suffixes right now. They remain the same even if we're outside of Necropolis. There's 2 different options to craft the suffixes. What we want is the Essence mod for more damage on low life or more elemental damage. Either is exactly the same for our build, since we're always on low life. We want sockets that gems are supported by hypothermia. Any tier is fine, obviously the higher the better. And we also want socketed spells have +3 crit chance. The tier 1 version is definitely preferable. To get that, there's 2 different methods. One of them is to use this fossil combination, which is Aberrant, Glyphic, and Frigid. Glyphic is the one that gives you one of the 4 random essence modifiers, as well as Aberrant to block out some mods and Frigid to increase the cold. You can do that, or you can do essences of either Hysteria for socketed gems deal more damage on low life, or Horrors for socketed gems deal more elemental damage. Depending on the market and depending on bulk prices and things like that, you might need to check which is going to end up cheaper. But I've got a simulator here which can simulate the cost of getting the suffixes just by changing the fossil to the essence method, and it should remain the same. But either way, it's pretty expensive, but I'm going to show the fossils for now. So using these 3 fossils, I'm going to go ahead and keep doing this until I hit one of the 2 more damage mods I'm looking for, as well as hypo. So if we do that for a little bit over here, yes, hypo, more damage, okay. And if we look at some of our results over here, we can see it's about a 1 in 6 average to hit what we're looking for those 2 mods. But the chances that we've got an open suffix are very slim, about a 23% chance. So chances are we need to annul, like this over here. So we take an annul and we hope we don't kill it. In this case we killed it. I'm just going to undo for the sake of brevity and just manually go and remove this to say we hit it. Once you're at this state, we're going to go suffixes cannot be changed. The actual suffixes cannot be changed because you see we've got an open suffix still. And now we're going to reforge crit. So there's 6 possible crit tiers and modifiers to hit. There's socketed attacks have more crit, and then there's socketed spells have crit. Each of them have 3 different tiers each, so it's a 1 in 6 to hit what we want. If we reforge crit, you can see we hit T2 spell crit over here, which you can settle for if you go to PoE and just make sure T2 crit is going to be enough for you. If not, because we're going to go for T1 over here, I'll quickly show you what you can do. Now, provided you don't have another influence prefix, which you can just annul off as well, instead of annulling the mod we don't want, we could 50-50 Orb of Dominance it. The upside of this is it will elevate the hypo to a higher tier, which is not required at all. It's just a nice benefit from the 50-50 Orb of Dominance instead of just plain annulling it. So we go for the 50-50 here, we hit it, which means we can go for another suffixes cannot be changed, reforge crit, in hopes we hit T1 spell crit. Now, for the sake of brevity, I am going to just do this until we hit T1 spell crit, which can take a couple of attempts. There we go. Make sure it's spell crit and not attack crit before continuing. You don't want to realize down the line that it was attack crit, and that would just feel awful. So now I'm going to remove this and slap on the conk effect, which we would have had fractured. If this is not Necropolis, how you get the conk effect is by blocking the highest weight, which if we take a look over here, the highest weight on the armor, first of all, let's look for any shared modifiers. There are none. Shared modifiers would be if these numbers were the same. There are none at the moment. So the highest weight is this over here, 17.9. So we just craft any tier of life and slam twice until you hit conk effect. Then suffixes cannot be changed through Bristle Matron, and annul and hope you clean the other prefix if there is one. Once you've got your isolated conk effect, that's where we can continue from here. Now we would Wild Bristle Matron for suffixes cannot be changed. With Ashling Veil, for in our case in Necropolis it's a guaranteed hit, otherwise it's a 50-50 because it could take your conk effect like that, which I will undo. And then our biggest blocker, if we take a look at the veils, it's a 43% chance normally, sorry, let me undo that. It's a 37% chance normally to unveil +2 AoE. And if we look at the rest of the things we could unveil, the heaviest one is this, for the +1 maximum number of raised zombies at 2000 weighting. So we block that. And now it goes up to a 43.7% chance of hitting what we want. Knowing that, let us slap on +1 max zombies and go for the unveil, which we missed. So I'm just going to undo for the sake of brevity. Now you can see why the fractured conch effect would be so nice to have normally. And there we go. 1 in 3, which is pretty much average. And from that point on, just benchcraft life, and we are done. So, next up would be the body. So the body is a purely necropolis thing. As you can see over here, 2 of the modifiers, the fire resistance cannot be penetrated, and the reduced extra damage from crits, both of these are haunted modifiers. Which again, we have no idea how it's going to look after this league. So this is probably going to be purely this league thing. But basically, if you go to Craft of Exile, select a glorious plate, and at least put under the graveyard crafting 1 haunted modifier on here, you should be able to select the mods you want under the haunted modifiers, which is the fire res cannot be penetrated, reduced extra damage from crits. We also want a T1 resistance, which in this case we want fire, because we don't want to increase the chance of hitting cold or lightning, because that would increase the chance of hitting cold resistance cannot be penetrated or lightning resistance cannot be penetrated. So we go fire resistance because we can swap it at any time with harvest. We also want T1 armor, flat armor, and we want T1% armor. Keep a note just before crafting that it's at least item level 86, so you may need to chuck a few item level corpses in there to make sure it's 86 to be able to hit that. With this combination, it's about a 1 in 6 to hit this. The reason it's a 1 in 6 is because I've only got 5 explicit modifiers on my item. The reason I do that is because then I don't need to chance and null the prefix, and it'll be guaranteed what I want if it hits the 1 in 6. Morph's method of doing this has 6 explicit modifiers and is a 1 in 2, about a 50% chance to actually hit this item. On the downside, you need to then 1 in 3 Eldritch annul the prefix to remove whatever extra prefix you hit. In that case, it equates to about a 1 in 6 as well, so pick your poison, whichever method is better. If you want to check out his layout, I think it's in his Twitch chat. There's a command for it. I can't remember 100%, but yeah, just check out his stream. You should be able to get his one there. This is my layout that I used. It's a pretty expensive layout because I'm using the additional crafts. If you don't want to use the additional crafts and want to do these manually by buying these every time, all of these corpses every time, you can do that. That would avoid the very expensive additional crafts, but I basically went for 5 items crafted, and as you can see, with 5 tries at this, there's a 60% confidence of hitting at least one of them. And that's exactly what happened. I went through this craft, I hit one of them, and that was it. I'm not going to touch that again because that was a lot of effort. Yeah, from that point on, you just bench craft first taken as until perfect roll, and then do your implicits, and you are done. Next up, the gloves. So what we want is Fractured Temple modifier with increased damage with hits against chilled enemies, and T1 life regeneration rate, as well as any T1 resistance, because again we can swap them around. To get that fractured modifier on a good base, you're probably going to pay way too much money, so depending again on the price of things, you might want to do this yourself instead. You're going to have to look at the market at the time to decide how to do that, which is going to be cheaper. But let's say we're going to assume we're going to craft it ourselves. We go to the wiki, just take a look quickly at the gloves. So you can see the best possible base would be Titan Gauntlets for the most armor, but you don't need to get that. You can settle for a bit lower. I went for Goliath Gauntlets because it was the cheapest one with good availability of the temple mods I was looking for. So what you do is a non-fractured, non-corrupted, non-mirrored pair of gloves with at least item level 85. We can see why over here. We want at least item level 85 for T1 life regeneration rate. And then what we want is, if you set the evasion and the energy shield to max as well, you can also just see all armor bases, for example, and then just go through and look for what you want. We want any of the 3 temple mods: percent damage with hits against chilled, flat added fire against burning, or crit chance against shocked. Either of them work because we can just harvest swap the res to get the one we want. Once we found the item we want, we can just, let's say we got this one, for example. You can see there's 5 modifiers, so you can just slap on a, wait, this isn't 5, is it? This is 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 4. This is ready for fracture. If you've got more than 4, you just slap on Eldritch Ember, and then just Eldritch Annul one of the prefixes off or whatever. Just get down to 4 modifiers, and then use the Harvest Res swap to swap to the cold one you want. Just remember to also keep doing it until you actually get a good roll of percent damage against chilled enemies. You don't want to hit your fracture with like a 30% and then just feel horrible. So just keep that in mind. Once you've eventually got your gloves, like this over here, as we can see here, here's our fractured mod, and now we want to hit a T1 resistance as well as life regeneration rate. That's very easy to do. All we need to do is take any one of the T1 resistance essences. We can't do cold because we will have cold fractured, so we use either anger or wrath for T1 lightning or fire, whichever is cheaper, and we spam that until we hit T1 increased life regeneration rate. It's about a 1 in 78 on average for about 148 chaos at the time of this recording, maybe more in bulk. But let's say we hit that. I'm not going to do that for the sake of brevity. And now we're at this point. Our suffixes are complete. We may need to clean prefixes with Eldritch Annuls for now, but let's assume we've got clean prefixes. Now we can Wild Bristle Matron for the suffixes cannot be changed. And again, like I mentioned, if you're going expensive, you could attempt to go for the Eldritch for the T1 life as an Eldritch currency prefix. I'm not going to bother with that for now, and I'm just going to straight up Veiled Orb this, which is guaranteed hit. Now, there's a couple of things we could want on the prefixes to unveil. One of them, if we take a look at our unveils, actually it's going to be easier to see over here. If we look at the veiled modifiers, Penance brand has already got 50% Fizz converted to lightning, so that's covered. We want to get Fizz converted to fire and Fizz converted to cold, and we want to get life on our gloves. So we've got implicits and we've got 2 prefixes to be able to do this. So we are happy if we unveil either Fizz converted to cold, Fizz converted to fire, or worst comes to worst, this flat life over here. So we need to look at what's our heaviest blocker, which, if you can see over here, is Fizz converted to lightning at 2000. So if we go to the emulator and we on crafted modifiers put Fizz converted to lightning, we should have a pretty good chance of hitting at least one of the ones we want. In this case it was a fail. We actually didn't hit any of the ones we want, so you would have to Veiled Orb again. Nice, we hit the 30% Fizz converted to cold, so we're going to take that. And we're just going to bench craft on life. And now we would need to get the remainder of our Fizz damage converted to fire through the implicits. And that's about it for the gloves. Next up will be the boots. So, very, very similar process. Start with a good armor base, fractured life regeneration rate. Chances are this will be cheap on trade side. I think I bought mine for about 1 or 2 divines, can't remember. In terms of item level, because it's fractured life regeneration rate, it will at least be item level 85 already. If you care about the very, very slim chance, very, very exceedingly slim chance of hitting T1 movement speed, you can go for an item level 86 pair of boots, but chances are very slim. Once you have that, what we want is chaos resistance T1, and we want T1 of any of the other resistances as well, because we can just swap in harvest. So what we do is we take a deafening envy essence, which gives us T1 chaos res, and we just spam that until we hit any of the tiers of T1 of the resistances. It'll take about 26 on average to hit, and then your suffixes are complete. If you look at your prefixes, it's about the same as before. Wild Bristle Matron for suffixes cannot be changed. We can Veiled Orb this. In terms of blockers, let's take a look. So I've already blocked the highest weight one, but if we take a look at what we can possibly get, we can get the Hybrid Armor Life, Evasion Rating Well Focused, the 3 movement speed mods, which is the ones we want, Hybrid Life Mana and Life Regen. So none of these are shared, which means they're all individual, and if we look at the highest ones, they're the ones we want. The others are all equal at 1000. So we can just slap on Life, and we can see now it's a 57% chance to hit any of the movement speeds. Considering the fact that any of them are good, it's pretty much guaranteed that we hit what we want. So let's take a look. If we block Life over here, and then Unveil, there's our movement speed. In terms of which one is best and so on, I'll quickly go over that. Our best possible option would be 100% chance to avoid being chilled, because that's just such nice quality of life. Our second best option would be increased movement speed if you haven't been hit recently. There's not often, but it is nice for moving around when there's no monsters around, for example. The worst option is the Onslaught on kill, because Onslaught is a dead mod. Since we're using Mage Blood and a Silver Flask, we've already got Onslaught all the time anyway. But then, yeah, you just slap on Crafted Life, and you are done. You just need to do your Blizzards. Cool. Next up, the ring. So, what we want to start off with is the Fracture 10% Fizzes Extra Fire. Now this comes from 2 places. One of them is from Delve, but the chance of getting a Fractured Fizzes Extra Fire on a Vermilion ring from Delve is exceedingly low and will be priced extremely high. So to get around this, we can fracture it ourselves. Do check the market to see if there is any available for cheap. Chances are they're going to be expensive. So to craft it yourself, it's very, very simple. I'll show that over here. So you take a clean Vermilion ring. In terms of levels, you want at least level 79, because you're going to want T1 damage taken recouped as life. So at least 79, the rest of it doesn't matter. We're going to use a single Essence of Hysteria and hope for 4 mods. If we don't have 4 mods, we just annul 1 down, and then we Fracture Orb for the 1 in 4, which I will do here quickly. RNG is RNG, and you could, like this, get absolutely screwed over, but there we go. At this point, you want to make sure you scour it, and now use the Fertile Catalysts, because you're going to need a lot fewer of them if you do it this way on a magic item, since we can't brick the item now once we've got our Fractured modifier. Okay, so to finish off the suffixes on this item, if I show you here quickly, what we want is Crit Multi, which can only come from the Essence. We want T1 damage taken recouped as life, and preferably T1 cast speed, but I settled for T3. And to go over how we get that, I'll just quickly make this rare. We use Essences of Scorn, and just to show you the chances, it's about 244 Essences of Scorn on average to hit T1 damage taken recouped as life. The problem is then, you also need to normally annul off the 3rd suffix. So I can quickly show that over here. So if we do this, I'm just going to say until we hit T1 damage taken recoup, just so we don't sit here forever. If you get to this state, as you can see, you would need to annul off the 3rd suffix, which does suck. It's the reason I settled for T3, because I didn't want to sit here forever, but I'm going to just manually remove this. Once you're at this step, you have to benchcraft on. Suffixes cannot be changed. Where is that? Sorry, I was in the wrong place. Suffixes cannot be changed. And reforge caster. Now, it's guaranteed to hit cast speed. It's a 66% chance to hit T2 plus and a 33% chance to hit T1. As we can see, of course, now we hit it. There is a risk of reforge though, as you can see over here. We filled up our prefixes. So at this point, depending on how much you spent and how much locks are, you could lock annul this, which would be very expensive. If you get this unlucky, it's a 1 in 10 or 12, I can't remember, to fill up. Yeah, then it's just unlucky. In this case, at least we saved it. Yeah, so from this point out, Wild Bristle Matron for suffix is going to be changed. Scour, Wild Bristle Matron again, Veiled Orb, because Unveiled Life is just as good as Benchcrafted Life. So, if we take a look at the best option to block for this, our chance of hitting Flat Life over here is 43%. And if we take a look at any of the other mods that we could potentially block, we can see that the highest one seems to be this mana mod. It's a shared pool over here for 600, 600, and 1000. So 1600, oh, and another 600 here. So this seems to be the best pool. We can just confirm if we block mana over here. Yep, we can still hit life. And now it's a 75% chance to hit it. So we go to the emulator. We craft on mana. And we unveil. And we hit life, which is what we wanted. Cool. And now you're going to bench craft on non-channeling skills. And your ring is done. For an idea of the costs and the reason I settled for T3, you can see over here, it's a lot of essences you're going to go through. Like this 36 divines over here at the time, like there's no way you're getting 725 scorn essences for what the price it is listed here. It's going to be a lot more in bulk. Yeah, and it's a lot of time and a lot of effort to get what we need. But yeah, that's the ring. Next up is our cluster jewels, which we need 3 things on them. It's T1 effect, T1 flat life, and T1 attack and cast speed with physical skills. The nice to have mod on either of them is the T1 chaos res and the T1 all elemental resistances. Those are the RNG ones that are very difficult to hit. So to go over how we craft them, we start with a 12 passive large cluster for physical damage. I like to start with pristine fossils to go any tier of life and any tier of effect. So I'll just do this quickly until we hit any tier of life. There we go. Any tier of life, any tier of effect. And now, while it's a shadow of what it used to be, Harvest, Reforge, more likely is still an option that helps with crafting these clusters. So in this case, well, there we go. Wow. Okay, that was extremely lucky. We actually hit T1 life with T1 effect and T1 attack and cast speed with physical skills. So when we fracture this, the chance is actually very good to hit what we want. So let's go ahead and do that now. Normally, ignore this attack and cast speed because it would be a 50-50. Wow. And of course we hit the one mod we didn't want. So yes, RNG is RNG. In this case, let's ignore the fact that we had this one here. We hit T1 life. Just make sure to divine it before fracturing, because you don't want to fracture anything lower than the 10. And yeah, so from this point on, now we're going to switch to Harvest, Reforge, Caster, because the attack and cast speed physical damage is a caster modifier. We're going to do that until we hit that mod, plus any tier of effect, and then once again, Harvest, Reforge more likely. So I'm just looking here until we hit effect. I saw we hit effect there, but we didn't hit the speed mod. Oops. Okay, so in this case, what I would do is Harvest, Reforge more likely again. T1, T3, and it's gone, so we need to caster again. I'm just going to undo T1, T2, T2, T1, T2, T2. There we go. So at this point now, you've got the core of the jewel you need, and now it's pure RNG. I don't think it'll ever be worth, but depending on the price of locks, you could try to slam this. Like right now, it's not worth it. You just like for 2 lock attempts, you can just buy the finished item, most probably. In this case, yeah, it's a pure RNG step here. You just slam. I should also mention, always keep an eye on what you've actually hit with your jewels, because a lot of jewels sell. For example, I hit T1 ES, T1 Effect, and T1 Int, I think. Unfortunately, it's on the physical large, which the int stackers don't really care about, but it did sell for, I think, like 10 divines in the end. So keep an eye on what you hit. At this step, if you hit something like this, Fire Res, you can either, depending on your tolerance for doing this again, annul and go again, or you can sell as is, and hope somebody buys it for like what, 20 or 30, I think at this stage is the market rate, and then just keep doing this until you hit what you want, or until you've gotten enough money that you just buy the finished one itself. For my cluster jewels, I hit the all res myself. I got lucky with the first one, and then the second one I hit all attributes, which I used for a while to play. I think I had negative 20 something chaos resistance because I didn't have a progenesis either. It's playable, just avoid the fizzes extra chaos mods. Eventually I did end up buying the finished one with the chaos res for about 70 odd divines. Yeah, that's the large clusters. Next up is our Adorned jewels. So they're pretty much your bog standard Adorned jewels. I don't really have much to say on them. I went for, because I was cheap and I just wanted to start playing the build as soon as possible. Sorry, I keep showing the ones with implicits. The majority of mine do not have any implicits. I started with Fractured Life and went for one of the multis. The reason we use Cobalt jewels is because it can roll crit multi for spell damage as well as crit multi for elemental damage. Either of those is fine, and with life, any of those 3 mods fractured, perfectly rolled, you just alt spam for the other one and you send it in the temple or through a Vaal orb, doesn't matter. I put all of mine through the temple. No, I didn't. That was the other build. I'm sorry. The mana stacker, I sent them through the temple. These I didn't because the fractured bases were extremely expensive, like 9 divines each. I ended up using the Lock Beast, which I'll talk about in a bit, to safely corrupt them. Unfortunately, I only ended up with 2 implicits. One of them is 4% AoE, and as you saw over here, the other one is 5% AoE. Yeah, so that's the easy way of crafting them. The other more expensive and the better way to do it is to go for synth implicit jewels. So what you do there is you look out for any implicit that's good. So for example here, the AoE, I'm just going to use as an example. There's cast speed, there's multi, things like that. There's many different options. You look for that as your implicit. Make sure it has a rollable value, like in this case 4 to 5 for example. The reason being is what we're going to do is Gilded Fossil it to get the other implicit for item sales to more to vendors. That is the one that's going to be eaten up by the Vaal orb. And then when you use the Black Morrigan Beast that was introduced this league and the Kraka Chimeral to Hinokoros lock the magic item, if it's not going to hit what you want, the only way you can remove the lock is to modify the item. And if you don't have a rollable implicit or an implicit with a varying roll, the only way you can change it to is to either recraft it with alts or divine it to change the values. So that's the benefit of having a rollable implicit, where you can just use some blessed orbs and go again. Yeah, but like I mentioned, you alt spam the synth jewel until you hit what you want, divine it to perfect, and then lock it through the beasts and hope you hit the Gilded Fossil implicit. That about covers those jewels. Next up, while we're on the topic of Adorned, you can settle for a lower value of Adorned. I'll quickly go over some of those breakpoints. So I just made a sheet here for the calculators from 120% to 150% for the two mods we're interested in. Keep in mind, you might want to also think about what breakpoints you need for any implicits you might have. For example, car speed or something like that. So you'd have to do something similar for those mods. I can't cover them all. But in this case, I'm going to show life and multi. As we can see, life gets, so because PoE always rounds down, the first life breakpoint is at 129% here, and then there's another at 143%. So you can see while mine sits at 138%, even though it should be 16.6, if I show you in game, it's just 16. So this is why the breakpoint of the percentage you get matters. Now, I'm at 138, so 138 for me is exactly the same as a 134. This is why it's inefficient. The reason I've got a 138 was because my previous build had breakpoints over here, so that's why I bought it. Just something to keep in mind when choosing your budget of what you might go for. That's it for the Adorned. Next up is the Lethal Pride. So for this variation of the build, we are using Rakiata, which gives us Tempered by War, which basically means 50% of our cold and lightning damage is taken as fire damage instead. The reason we do this is we have 90% fire res, as well as the fire res cannot be penetrated on the chest, which is a nice little extra defensive layer. What we try and get on this jewel is at least one first taken from hits as fire, as well as one double damage. You can use PoB or the Timeless Jewel Calculator to try and find a cheaper version, or settle for one if you're on a budget. But yeah, that's about it for that. Just make sure it's Rakiata for the Tempered by War. Just check, was there anything else? Nope, I think that's about it. Yeah, so thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, feel free to put it down in the comments, and I will try to address them and try to answer them as best as I can. If you've got any corrections, things I might have gotten wrong, feel free to also comment below, and I will pin any corrections that I made. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it helped, and see you next time.